You are all welcome to today's class, which is going to center on how performance management system can be used to manage the performance outcome of international employees. And by the end of this lecture, there are a number of things that you are expected to be equipped with, which include the definition or explanation of what international performance management constitutes. Again, we are also expected to appreciate the purpose or the reasons why it is important for the performance outcomes of international employees to be managed. Then we will interrogate how culture affects the management of performance of individuals on the international turf. Then we will also appreciate the foundations of performance appraisal and performance management system, drawing from the 4 international orientations which we learned in week 1. So generally speaking, multinational enterprises are very much concerned about the successful performance of their employees, particularly their international assignees that may be working on individual basis in the teams that they may be working in and on the various projects that they may be tasked by the multinational enterprise to also pursue. In the same vein, these individuals that work very hard in multinational enterprises may also end up working in a separate department or unit of the multinational enterprise. And the reason why they are very much concerned about their performance outcome is that when these individuals excel, it is able to help the enterprise also achieve its strategic objectives. In the same vein, when these individuals that are working for the international company is struggling to achieve their set targets, then that will not augur well for the well-being and the success of the multinational enterprise as far as its strategic objectives are concerned. So one of the cardinal tools that multinational enterprises can utilize to ensure that the performance of its employees does not deviate from the standards that have been set by the enterprise. And also to ensure that if things are not going as planned, they can introduce some remedies to bring suitable outcomes for the individuals as well as the employees, is to instigate what we call performance management system. So the establishment of employee performance management system is a general expectation for not only domestic organizations, but international firms as well. So irrespective of the nature of the business that you are running, if you are concerned about the performance of your organization, then it does suppose that it will be appropriate for you to start analyzing how the individuals that are working in there are excelling, so that if there are some remedies for you to introduce, you can bring that forth. So that is by way of introducing. Now, multinational enterprises are much more concerned and also worried about implementing successful performance management system, because unlike domestic organizations that may be confined within a single country, which may not be confronted by some of the challenges that may have to do with multiple cultures. Multinational enterprises may have its subsidiaries spread all over the world. And so when it comes to the management of its workforce, it becomes quite challenging and complicated because they will have to forge out a performance management system that will be suitable across all their subsidiaries as well as the headquarters. And forging this performance management system is not a child's play. So, as I indicated, the complexities associated with managing performance of employees, particularly in multinational enterprises, is quite challenging because of a number of reasons. And the first reason why it is quite complicated when it comes to the formulation and implementation of a performance management system by multinational enterprises borders on culture. So as we have all learned from lecture 2 through to the 6th lecture, culture plays a cardinal role in HR policies and practices. And when it comes to the implementation of performance management system, the perception of what may be the desired performance outcome has been found by research to be also determined by culture. And that is why we are saying that culture heavily impacts management practices in terms of issues such as the meaning of performance management. So whereas in certain cultural contexts, the supervisor, in an attempt to appraise an employee, may measure on the individual personality attributes such as being a team player, being assertive, and also being direct. In other cultural contexts, these personality attributes may, particularly if you demonstrate it towards a manager, may suggest that you are not respectful. And so when performance management standards are developed at the headquarters, which may be a Western environment, and this is imposed at the subsidiary level, which may also find itself to be within a non-Western context, then it becomes quite complicated because if the recipients of some of these performance standards are also not comfortable applying them, then it becomes quite a challenge for them to grapple with. Beyond the challenge that's associated with the meaning of performance management, employees' acceptance of the review process is also another thing that is culturally determined. So typically, Hofstede will suggest that in collectivistic cultural contexts, particularly the one that has high power distance, it is expected that performance is structured around teams because such cultural contexts flourish by working in teams or in groups. And so when you segregate an individual from their department or their unit and label them with favorable or unfavorable performance appraisal outcomes, it may not utter well with such cultural contexts. So the acceptance of the review process also is an issue that is culturally determined. Then the issue of the cultural value dimensions, which we will consider very soon in relation to what Hofstede had to say. So the point here is that in an attempt to institutionalize a performance management system for an organization, because the construct of performance is culturally determined and the measurement of performance favorability and unfavorability to is culturally determined, it becomes quite challenging to administer it as far as multinational enterprises are concerned. The next issue that has also made it quite complicated for multinational enterprises to implement a standardized performance management system also borders on whether they are supposed to use a single performance management system that is standardized across all the length and breadth of the organization, or they should allow some room for diversification, wherein each subsidiary country will develop performance management system that is culturally appropriate for their environment. So it is a huge dilemma for international HR professionals, particularly HR managers, to grapple with, because as we learned in our previous lectures, the policies and practices in multinational enterprises, including performance management, are all underpinned by some international orientations, ranging from ethnocentrism to geocentrism. And so, depending on the one that underscores the multinational enterprises performance management system, if it tends to be ethnocentric approach, then it means that a standardized performance management system will be championed by the multinational enterprise, irrespective of the peculiar cultural circumstances that the subsidiary countries may be having. And the reverse is true. And so it becomes more or less like a dilemma for the HR manager in the multinational enterprise to grapple with. Because in one end, he may be tempted to maintain the standard that has been prescribed by the headquarters or the parent company. But these standards may also be facing a lot of challenges and obstacles when it is implemented in an environment that is alien to the basic tenets of the performance management system. And so how do they manage it? Later on, we'll be considering the various options. The third reason why international performance management system has also been characterized to be fraught with a lot of complexities is that the international assignees, the performance management of the international assignees also presents particular challenge for managers and employees alike. The international assignees presents particular challenges for the managers and the employees alike. So let's start with the managers. If you are, assuming you are a manager from United States of America, and you have been tasked to go on an expatriate assignment in Ivory Coast. Now, because culturally, the orientation of the United States is totally different from that of Ivory Coast. When such a manager is being appraised in such a collectivistic cultural context, the likelihood for his immediate appraiser to impugn collectivistic sentiments in an attempt to discern his contribution to organizational success is high. Now, that will mean that whilst the American person may come across as more assertive and direct, that environment will not entertain it. But if it were to be in the American or the individualistic cultural context, being an assertive manager or being a direct manager will be welcomed as a sign of being in control. Unfortunately, in collectivistic cultural context, such tendencies from a manager will be construed as being confrontational or trying to force yourself on others. So if you are a manager on an expatriation, on an international assignment, and you find yourself in an environment that is also clashing with wherever you are originating from, then the chances for you to exhibit your traits wholeheartedly will be low. Now, for the employees alike, if such a manager is utilizing those attributes as it is expected in US, the same way in a collectivistic cultural context, then the employees that he is superintending over will also label the person to be so much forceful or utilizing much more confrontational attributes to get things done. And that wouldn't be something that they will be open to. So implicit in all these three reasons that I am enumerating suggests that culture is inseparable from the formulation and implementation of any performance management system. So what is performance management? Performance management can be explained as the process of appraising or assessing an individual's performance in a systematic way and going ahead to share the outcome of the appraisal with them with the view of giving feedback to such employees. Now, it is important for performance management system to go beyond appraisal in the sense that the appraisal will discern whether the actual performance of the employee is in line with the standards that have been set for the given employee. So once you communicate the content of this performance assessment to the employee, then you will put them on their toes and you will also inform them on how they are faring on their job. And if there is any remedy to bridge performance inadequacies or performance gaps, it can be adequately introduced following the discussion that will be held by the appraiser and the assessor. In the same vein, in some circumstances, the outcome of the performance assessment of an individual may suggest that it is the individual is demonstrating an excellent performance. So under such circumstance, it becomes ripe for the organization to sustain that level of performance in order to motivate the person in question and also serve as a lesson to onlookers who may be inclined to receive similar recognition for their performance. So explicitly in my explanation of performance management is that it includes an appraisal system and it also strives to enhance the performance of an employee, either by incentivizing the employee to sustain their current level of excellent performance or introducing some training or development interventions, or sometimes it may even be the introduction of some logistics to enhance the performance of the individual towards organizational success. So that is essentially what performance management is all about. Now, when we talk about international performance management system, then we are essentially elevating the discourse around performance management by incorporating how it is done on done by multinational or international companies. It can therefore be explained as the design, implementation, and evaluation of individuals in a multinational enterprise for the purpose of managing the performance of its global workforce so that their performance and contribution to the attainment of global objectives will not be curtailed. So anytime an attempt is made to design a system that can be utilized to measure the performance of individuals in a multinational enterprise and sustain their performance such that it continually contributes to the attainment of the multinational enterprises' strategic objectives, then we are dealing with an international performance management system. So just like the systems approach, an international performance management system means that the performance management is composed of several components, of which the appraisal is one. So beyond appraisal, it is important to verify and diagnose why performance is below standard or why an individual's performance is above standard. Once you're able to diagnose and bring meaning to some of these simple questions, then the other components of the system is that you will have to sustain the performance of those that are excelling on the job. And you may also have to encourage those that are not doing so well on the job through some form of interventions. And this may include offering them training to address their training needs, particularly if they are the sign of their non-performance or performance inadequacy is because they lack certain competencies or skills that can be addressed through training. Sometimes too, if it is as a result of inadequate logistics, then as part of the system, it is imperative to offer the required implements that can help the person deliver on the job. So once you put all these things together to help the individuals perform excellence and also the organization succeed in achieving its long-term objectives, then we are dealing with an international performance management system. What then is the purpose of an international performance management system? Just as you learned in your performance management class last semester, the purpose of any international performance management activity is to achieve two main outcomes. It is for evaluative purpose and developmental purpose. So when we talk about the evaluation goal of any performance management system, it simply borders on the degree to which an attempt is made to gather wealth of information bordering on the performance outcome of individuals and making that particular information available to the employees themselves, as well as all the important facets in the organization where that kind of records are expected to be kept. Then the developmental purpose of any international performance management system is the part of the performance management that strives to add value to the employees more than what they were prior to joining the company. So this may mean offering them opportunity to be trained and developed on the job, offering them opportunity to pursue career paths that are in line with their own career trajectory and the likes. So some of the evaluation goals that performance management seeks to achieve include to provide feedback to employees so that they will know where they stand, whether they are doing well or not. To also develop a validator for pay, promotion, job assignment decisions, and the likes. The decision to increase someone's pay or retard it, the decision to promote are all contingent on the performance appraisal information that are conducted and gathered by managers. And so the same can be said about individuals that work in multinational enterprises or that go on an international assignment. When we are doing or conducting an appraisal of them, it is to get a valid data against which we may say we may want to increase their pay, or maybe we may want to promote them to another portfolio that we believe they have currently showed signs and symptoms that they are apt for it. The third one is also identify high potential employees and manage their talent for optimal performance and retention. Now, if you want to verify individuals that are that can be earmarked for higher portfolios, or that can be recommended for future opportunities that may crop up, it is their performance appraisal outcome that will help us know that they are currently excelling and distinguishing themselves on the current job that we've offered them. The fourth one, as far as the developmental goal is concerned, is to help management in making discharge and retention decisions. So when an organization is going through restructuring, re-engineering, or any redundancy activity, one of the tools that they can utilize as a basis of laying off workers and also retaining talented workers is performance appraisal outcome. So if continually your performance appraisal results is suggesting that all the assignment that you've been offered, you are struggling to meet them, then it becomes clear that when it is quite inefficient for the organization to maintain all the current workforce they have. And so they are contemplating on which ones to jettison out of the organization. Such individuals will be easily discharged. And the ones that are also excelling are eventually going to be earmarked to be retained. In terms of developmental purposes of performance, international performance management system, the first objective is to help managers and, generally speaking, international assignees improve their performance and develop future potential. So when we finish conducting the appraisal and we are able to communicate the strengths and weaknesses of the international assignee to them, they are able to see where they can improve in order to enhance their career prospects. And they are also able to identify their current strengths, which they can utilize and harness to consolidate whatever they are currently doing. The second point, as far as the developmental goals is concerned, is to develop commitment to company through discussion of career opportunities and career planning with managers. So it is called a performance management system for a reason, in the sense that the individuals that conduct the performance appraisal, particularly the supervisors or the raters, are not only fixated about the appraisal, but they are equally concerned about helping individuals that may be having genuine challenges to overcome them. So the outcome of an appraisal exercise is not supposed to be a tool that should be used to punish employees for non-performance, but rather it is supposed to be a tool that can be used to add knowledge and impart and help them develop on their weaknesses. So if it is used to this end by helping employees overcome their weaknesses and also helping them to improve upon their current skills, knowledge, and abilities, then that will in turn make the employees more committed and satisfied to the organization that they are working for. So it ends up to motivate managers via recognition of their efforts. And it's also used to diagnose individual and organizational problems and how they should be addressed. And finally, it helps to identify individual training and development needs. And this is important because as you move from one employee to the other, as far as their performance appraisal outcomes are concerned, you will realize that whereas my performance deficiencies or my performance need may be how to use a computer in teaching, for others, it may, the need may be getting a well-lit work environment. And for another person, it may also be getting a very nice desk and chair in the office. So for another person, as far as training needs are concerned, whilst candidate A may have a need for maybe how to use the new software that has been procured by the organization, so that there should be some workshop organized on it. For another person, it may be on how to improve his or her typing speed. So training need may differ. And once you are able to identify individual training needs, it can help the organization to decide on the most suitable training program that they can organize for the members, particularly if that particular lane is very much common among the ones that are expressed by all and sundry. Now, the issue of culture and performance management. As I indicated earlier on, performance management is a managerial or an HR practice that is also culturally determined in the sense that the way and manner performance is construed or defined has some cultural connotations. And so when it comes to the appraisal of an employee's performance, and we do not take it in conjunction with the cultural environment where this appraisal is being done, we are likely to label some people demonstrating certain traits as demonstrating bad performance outcomes, whilst it may actually be appropriate for their culture. As we speak now, with the increased globalization, particularly by developed countries where most of these multinational enterprises originate, Western HR practices are being applied around the world. And in even most non-Western cultural contexts, we tend to experience the imposition of some of these Western HR practices. So strictly speaking, when we are conducting performance appraisal, some of the personality attributes that we expect the employees to exhibit, such as gregariousness or conscientiousness, all those attributes are something that may be alien to the cultural context. But these instruments that we are using were developed by the parent company, and this parent company may also be originating from the Western context. And although the body of performance management knowledge is highly US-centric, which means that most of the literature that we have now were championed and put together by individuals that are currently found in the United States of America, it is apparently clear that we cannot pay a deaf ear to some of the peculiar performance attributes that are relevant in the Northwestern context, particularly when we are administering some of these Western ones. And as we learn from Hofstede's cultural dimensions, it is important to note that performance appraisal is also culturally bound. For that reason, it is important for us to consider how some of these cultural dimensions may influence performance management system. And the lesson here is that when multinational enterprises are implementing a performance management system, they have to be concerned about the culture of the targeted country and not only interested in maintaining a standardized performance management system. So as we learned in Hofstede's cultural dimensions, it is composed of at least 5 dimensions ranging from individualism versus collectivism, power distance, masculinity, femininity, uncertainty avoidance, and then time horizon ranging from long-term and short-term time horizon. So last week I mentioned that it is actually 5 and not 4. And I believe by now you should have made your notes with the 5th one. So cultural value dimensions are several, and they also influence the way performance, a good performance is differentiated from a bad performance. For example, in collectivistic cultural context, that may also be markedly filled with high power distance attributes. Performance management is said to be culturally more compatible with a focus on broad performance targets than with specific performance criteria. So the reason why collectivistic may be more interested in broad performance targets than specific performance criteria is that they tend to work in teams, or they enjoy. So the bottom line as far as collectivism is concerned is that individuals that identify with such cultures or that originate from such cultures tend to define themselves by making reference with their close group members. And that is why they form stronger bonds or cohesive bonds with their, not only their family members, but even at the place of work, they're able to form closer ties and closer bonds. And so when it comes to performance appraisal, they expect the criteria to be broader to encompass group appraisal or accountability rather than individual accountability. But the reverse is true. If it were to be in an individualistic cultural context where power distance is very low, then it is obvious that they will be expecting for organizations to measure on individual accountability as opposed to group-oriented accountability. Now, such cultural contexts also tend to maintain harmonious relationship. And so anytime a close affiliate is given an unfavorable appraisal, it mirrors back to them. So it's just like in our Ghanaian society, if a particular child is misbehaving in the public, they do not wait for the family members to come there before the child is corrected. But any person that will be available there will assume that responsibility as a parent or a family member and bring the child to books. Now, the philosophy behind this kind of child nurturing is that if they all stand there for the child to go wayward, at the end of the day, when the child is being labeled as a deviant or a bad child, it will reflect back to the community or the society, and in the smaller sense, the family where the child is coming from. So that sort of appraisal as being a good child or a bad child, if it is good, it will mirror something good about the family where the child is coming from. And if it is bad, it will also mirror something negative. The same can be said about performance appraisal systems in collectivistic cultural contexts where there is higher power distance. What that means is that appraisers will have to be careful about the labels that they assign to individuals and the groups that they will be appraising, because when they assign a bad label, such as a lazy worker or a truant or an absentee worker, such a label, even though a Westerner may expect the assessment to be upfront and direct, such a label will have serious repercussions in reflecting the image of all the group members of that particular team, wherein an individual is receiving this particular label. And there's also the notion where saving face and connections is emphasized at the expense of direct confrontation. Saving face and connections is emphasized rather than direct confrontation. So typically, in a collectivistic context, it is unheard of. In fact, it is not welcome to be speaking to an elderly person, particularly if the manager is older than this elderly person that they are appraising, to be rebuking and telling them direct that their performance is abysmal. That may have several levels of meaning. At one level, it may be a sign of disrespect because of the high power distance. And at another level too, that's others may treat it as being too direct, because they will expect that by, even as the elderly person is doing something wrong, you will have to find a nice way to, if you like, massage your communication so that it does not come to the person in that unpalatable terms. And that is the challenge we have as far as this collectivistic and high power distance cultural context appraisal systems and performance management are concerned. But if it were to be a Western context, that is how they will want this to be. If the person is stupid, whether he is an elderly or a younger person, you will have to communicate directly. And they will also receive it wholeheartedly, noting that in future they are not expected to demonstrate those kind of behaviors. So that is it as far as the issue of culture is concerned. Now, still on culture, so it becomes clear that because culture that informed the development of a particular performance management system for a parent country may be different from the culture that maintained at the subsidiary level, a lot of care and attention must be used whenever some of these performance appraisals are being implemented. It shouldn't be implemented as if a one-size-fits-all jacket can yield the same results irrespective of the environment, but rather it should be implemented with some level of sensitivity to the cultural environment. Now, so culture, still on culture and performance management. Research suggests that the decision to accept or repel a particular performance management system as being favorable or unfavorable is still traceable to the 4 international orientations that we learned. And this means that depending on the international orientation, which informs the performance management of a multinational enterprise, they are likely to force all other subsidiaries to adopt what maintains at the headquarters. They are also likely to give higher level of autonomy to the subsidiary countries to also implement their own performance management systems, but of course, which must still be able to meet the standard that has been set by the parent country. So that brings us to the cultural management theory, which has labeled this particular issue or dilemma as convergence-divergence hypothesis. The convergence-divergence hypothesis. So the convergence-divergence hypothesis is an amalgamation of 2 schools of thoughts. The first school of thought is the convergence school of thought, which contains that all HR policies and practices, including performance management, should adhere to the directives and the standards that have been set by the headquarters, such that all subsidiary companies that are drawing its powers from the parent country are expected to also implement performance management systems that have been spelled out in unequivocal terms by the headquarters. So convergence simply means that all the various subsidiary branches of the multinational enterprises are supposed to practice performance management systems that will align with the directives of the headquarters. So it should converge with what the headquarters is saying. Now, on the other hand, divergence aspect of the hypothesis also belongs to the school of thought that acknowledges that because culture is very much influential in the formulation of HR policies, including performance management systems, it is important to accord the subsidiary countries the autonomy and power they require in order to develop their tailor-made HR policy, performance management systems that will be relevant for the environment where they are operating. So you realize it's a sharp contrast. The convergence is a sharp contrast to the divergence. Okay, the convergence is a sharp contrast to the divergence. And we are now going to take our time to interrogate them. Just a minute, I'll be with you. Now, I was explaining the convergence and the divergence hypothesis, and I indicated that the proponents or the convergence school of thoughts are of the opinion that if we juxtapose cultural nuances of countries across the globe, there is a minute difference among them. And so they believe that when HR policies and practices are developed by Western countries, and particularly the parent companies, these same HR policies and practices can be replicated at the subsidiary level with no difficulty met, simply because there isn't much variation between the cultures. So that is the reason why they may want to suggest that when certain performance management systems are developed for US workers or for European workers. These same performance management systems can be replicated in Ghana, even though the cultural environment of Ghana is different from that of US and Europe. And they expect that because the standards that have been set by these Westerners are very high, when we bring the same standards here and its nitty-gritties, we shouldn't expect to achieve any unfavorable results as far as the performance appraisal practices are concerned. So that is the core argument of the convergence approach. And who can tell me the international orientation that will be fueling this convergence proponents arguments? Which international orientation will be fueling it? Just mention it. I just want to mention it, then I'll be fine. No any further explanation we have. So which international orientation do you think will be fueling the argument put forth by the convergence school of thought? Yes, can anyone help us? Hello, are you there?
Please, we are
Did you hear my question?
no, sir.
Okay. But did you get the explanation I gave for the convergence?
No, sir.
So what you tell me what you heard. So what did you hear? So as I indicated, the standardization approach is consistent with the propositions put forth by the convergence proponents. And that is also in line with the argument put forth by the exportative approach. Conversely, the localization approach, which suggests that there is a wide variance in the culture that maintained in the Western countries where most of these headquarters of the multinational enterprises are found, and that of the subsidiary countries where their branches are found. So because of these wide variations in their culture, the subsidiary countries should be afforded the autonomy and authority to tailor-make performance management system that will sit well with such cultural contexts. So localization approach simply means that we should afford the subsidiary countries an opportunity to formulate their own performance management system that will be suitable for their operations therein, and also be more realistic to some of the happenings over there. So at the moment we talk about the localization approach, then we are rather dealing with another school of thought as far as international performance management system is called, which is known as the adaptive or the adaptative approach. The adaptative approach. The adaptive or adaptative strategy. So adaptative strategy is to divergence approach, whilst exportative strategy is to convergence approach. Alternatively, exportative strategy is to standardization of performance management system, whilst adaptative strategy is to localization of performance management strategy. Now, just as there is a room for the strengths of both convergence and divergence to be brought together in order to have a unique performance management system that will sit well with a given environment, which gave birth to what we call cross-vergence. The strengths of both exploitative and adaptative can also be integrated to generate what we call the integrative strategy, which combines both the performance management practices of those within the region and around the world, which means that it is interested in tapping into the best practices that are being championed by these Westerners and the headquarters, but it is also equally sensitive to the local sentiments that may be prevailing within the given region where the multinational enterprises subsidiary is operating. And for transnational firms, there is even room for them to practice what we call glocal system, which means they are thinking global, but also acting locally. And that is closer to what we call the integrative strategy. Now, let's quickly look at the characteristics of an effective performance management system. So just as we learned in performance management class, for a given performance management system to be designed to be very much effective, the first one is that it should be relevant, which means that it should be able to achieve the purpose that it intends to achieve. So assuming the content of the performance management system is to add value to employees, at the end of the day, we should be able to see traces of value being added to employees, instead of it coming across as a punishment to employees. So international human resource managers need to ensure that the criteria and the process for evaluation are relevant to the content and the requirement of the job, such that if you are an accounting person and we are conducting an appraisal for you, the contents of the questions that are being posed to you should border on accounting, but not HR or marketing. The moment we start asking you or we start assessing you on contents that are not relevant for the job you are doing, then it means that the performance appraisal system is not effective and it can never help you under such circumstance. So what this means is that for it to be relevant, the contents of the evaluation tool should reflect the knowledge that you are expected to embody. And it should test those knowledge to see whether you are on top of issues or there is more room for improvements. The second criteria for an effective performance management system is that it needs to be acceptable. It needs to be acceptable. And this means that the criteria, the process that is used should be acceptable to both the evaluator and the assignee, that is the one that is going to be assessed, such that if those individuals are not comfortable with it, especially if the contents and the criteria it is going to be used is something that they do not have any knowledge or know-how about, then it will be very much difficult for them to administer it. And under such circumstances, you verify that the supervisor or the manager who is even expected to administer it will decide to boycott the system, whilst the appraisee too will not find it comfortable to participate in it. So as much as possible, it should be something that the evaluator has a lot of knowledge and acceptance to, whilst the appraisee too must also accept it. Then the fourth one is that it borders on its sensitivity. So an effective international performance management system should consider the cultural and international business realities. Sometimes the questions that are being asked to check whether the international assignee is performing favorably or unfavorably may be full of issues or cultural sentiments that has nothing to do with their current environment where they are operating. And that is where the dilemma between exploitative, adaptive, and integrative becomes imperative. So as much as possible, you need to be clear in your mind about the cultural environment where the individual is working and make some of those cultural issues relevant for the appraisal system so that they can also relate to it. Then the fourth one also border on the practicability of the performance management system. As much as possible, it should be easy to use or easy to administer. Now, if it is too complicated for the supervisor or the manager to administer, they may end up boycotting it. In the same vein, if it is too much convoluted and voluminous for the appraisees to also complete, particularly the one that we complete with either pencil or paper. In this day and age, you can also complete it electronically using some form of technology. Now, if this is what we are talking about, and you have lengthy questions to answer or attend to, then the likelihood that it will be met with a lot of resistance or challenges along the way is high. And so as much as possible, it has to be practicable. Okay, so these ones are quite straightforward. When you go, then you take a look at them. It is essentially trying to explain the circumstances surrounding the performance management of international assignees. And the argument here is that irrespective of the time horizon of an international assignee, whether they are going for a short period of time or a long period of time, the performance that they demonstrate over there is very much critical to the success of the multinational enterprise, because the multinational enterprise will be incurring huge sums of money to be running the expatriation exercise. Typically speaking, the compensation and benefit package that is associated with an international assignment is usually over and above the ones that are received by the domestic workforce or those that are the subsidiary level. And so if you are going to spend all this money and at the end of the day, the performance of the international assignee will be nothing to write home about, then it becomes questionable. In the same vein, the amount of time, energy, and resources that are utilized to prepare the international assignee for the work out there is also quite huge. And so it is very much necessary that when they go out there, they are also able to excel. Now, so the reason why the assessment of performance of international assignees is very much important to multinational enterprises, because their maintenance is also very, very expensive. So at the end of the day, it is that information that will show the company whether they are getting value for money or they are whether they chose the right person for the assignment or whatever. Now, for the appraisal of performance of international assignees, it is complicated by a number of issues, as I raised earlier on, issues including the culture of the subsidiary where they may be operating. So when there is a vast difference between the parent country's culture and the host country's culture, then the complexity surrounding it also becomes quite more pervasive. Now, the decision on who gets to conduct the appraisal is an issue that confronts the performance appraisal of international assignment, because the international orientation of the multinational enterprise may dictate who does the appraisal. So if they are going by the ethnocentric, and for that matter, utilizing the exploitative approach or the convergence approach, they may end up assigning someone at the headquarters to be doing the evaluation, even though this person may not, there will be time difference, and the level of proximity between the appraiser and the person working on the international assignment will also be wide. The same person will now be expected to be doing the appraisal. So you realize some of the feedback and the information that will be raised during the appraisal system will not be readily relevant, as opposed to a situation where a manager at the subsidiary level was tasked to do the appraisal. And under such circumstances, because the manager will be always monitoring and privy to the happenings in the subsidiary company, as well as in the performance of the international assigning, they will be able to give relevant details and scenarios to juxtapose some of the ratings they are offering to the international assigning. So these are some of the issues that surround the appraisal of an international assignee. And depending on the international orientation, the appropriate one may be selected by the multinational enterprise. Now, international assignee appraisal systems are also confronted with a number of challenges. So we are talking about the appraisal system, which is the evaluation of the performance of the international assignee. Implicit in these challenges are 7 things which I want us to consider. And the first one is that there may be problems with the choice of evaluator, whether local or from the parent country. Whereas someone from the local may be more appropriate because they have closer contact and proximity to the current happenings of the international assignee's performance. The international orientation of the multinational enterprise may be dictating that rather someone from the parent company does the appraisal, because these individuals rather understand the standards and the performance metrics that have been spelled out by the headquarters. So it may become quite challenging to actually get accurate assessment of an international assignee's performance. The second one also borders on inadequate contact between home country rater and subsidiary rater. As we are all aware, in multinational enterprises, particularly in multinational enterprises that utilize the matrix organizational structure. So when I say the matrix organizational structure or the matrix organizational structure, but let me write it. Matrix. The matrix organizational structure. The matrix organizational structure will mean that the unity of command principle, which Max Weber suggests that at any point in time, every employee is expected to report to only one supervisor, is violated by this matrix structure that multinational enterprises run. So what this will mean is that on the vertical line, within the subsidiary country where the international assignee is performing, he may be reporting to an immediate supervisor over there. But on the horizontal line, the same international assignee may also be reporting to another person at the headquarters. And this is very much present in the automobile industry. So like the Japan Motors, the Nissan, the Toyota Ghana, Japan Motors Ghana, and then Mercedes-Benz or Nissan Ghana. What happens is that their parent company will develop the parts of the car. And then because Ghana, we are noted for just assembling and putting the cars together, the parts will be brought to Ghana for it to be assembled, right? Now, when it gets to Ghana, it is expected that the one that will be in charge of assembling will have to consult where the various parts were produced and the manual that came with it. So in order to avoid a situation where the Ghanaian counterparts will be operating with the premise that they are already used to the assembling of, let's say, Toyota cars, and so they are not going to consult their counterparts in Japan for some minute details on the new model that might have been sent to them. The matrix structure will require that, in as much as they will be consulting their supervisors in Ghana, they are equally expected to be consulting their supervisors in Japan in order to consolidate and, if you like, triangulate the directives that are coming from these two superiors. So that will mean that the matrix structure, which will be utilized by some of these multinational enterprises, will create some level of ambivalence in terms of determining whether you are supposed to be rated by someone at your home country or someone at the subsidiary level. Especially when it comes to the end of the year. Are you supposed to be appraised by the supervisor that's monitored you to assemble the cars in Ghana? Or you are also supposed to be appraised by your Japanese supervisor, who is equally concerned about quality control issues that may be raised by the customers of Japan Motors. So you will have to be reporting to each of these, and they will also have to appraise you whether you were able to assemble the cars to the best of the standard that was set for you. And that is a challenge to be grappled with as far as multinational enterprises are concerned. Then there is difficulty with long distance and virtual communication with home and headquarters management. So if you are working in an environment where the pace of technology and communication adopts some level of virtual communication, but the technological architecture that is used in embarking on some of these communications are also not that viable, then a lot of challenges will maintain, because before you can appraise an employee and give adequate feedback, you must have monitored them continually. And so if this technological architecture is not offering you the opportunity to do the right monitoring, then on what basis will you be able to also appraise them when you did not actually see what they were doing on a day-to-day basis? Now, differences in home and host country management perceptions of what is valued in terms of performance and in terms of perception of actual behavior. And this borders on the issues I raised when I was explaining the cultural dimensions that play a huge role in our definition and conceptualization of what is a superior performance or what is an acceptable performance and which one is not an acceptable performance. So whereas being an assertive international assignee or being an assignee that is more direct with your pronouncement and with your remarks will be welcomed in an individualistic cultural context. That may be interpreted as a sign of confrontation or forcefulness, which may not be so much welcomed in a collectivistic cultural context. Now, the same can also be said about our work orientation. Whereas in individualistic context, decision-making is expected to be the sole responsibility of individuals. And so when individuals are able to make quick and faster decision-making, they will be rewarded accordingly. In collectivistic cultural context, decision-making is rather expected to be built on consultation or consensus building. So don't forget, in collectivistic cultural context, individuals derive their self-construct based on their attachment to groups or the cohesive nature of their relation with group members. And so before they embark on any decision as a department or as an organization, there is the need for a lengthy consensus to be built, and that will mean that decision-making will be slower. So a typical Westerner will appraise such consensus-building decision-making approach as a retardation of organizational success. And the reverse is true. If a Westerner is operating in a collectivistic cultural context, and this Westerner as a manager pursues a quick decision-making without consulting other wider members of the team or the organization that it is working with, that may be also construed as something that is what? Not forthcoming or acceptable in that cultural context. So the question comes back to the perception that a particular cultural context or cultural context may have for a given behavior to be either deviant or acceptable. And all these things are culturally prescribed. And so it becomes quite challenging when you are appraising international assignees. And you are also faced with some of these dilemmas. Now, when there are inadequate establishment of performance objectives for the foreign operations, it becomes quite challenging to also appraise performance. Now, home country ethnocentrism and lack of understanding of foreign environments and culture may also prove very much challenging to the attainment of favorable performance and international assignee appraisal. This is so because the international assignee is going to be appraised at the whims and caprices of the headquarters, and that may have little to do with the peculiar circumstances that the international assignee is currently finding him or herself. And so it may not come across as something realistic or relevant to the international assignee's appraisal outcomes. Then frequent indifference to foreign experiences of expatriates and to the importance of the international business in general. So when the headquarters in particular is indifferent to foreign experiences, especially after the expatriates have brought their international assignment to an end, it is expected that all the knowledge that they acquired on the assignment on their return should be tapped into by the headquarters. But if they treat it with indifference and they do not also regard that knowledge with the view that the knowledge that maintained at the headquarters is superior to whatever experience these foreign expatriates are going to bring, then it makes the appraisal system very much challenging, which means that no matter how excellent you are doing, you are second to the headquarters. Now, there are also challenges that are associated with the effectiveness of an international performance management system. So in order for an international performance management to be effective, it needs to be given certain tools and accessories for it to function very well. But when these tools or accessories are not forthcoming, then it becomes quite challenging to institute an international performance management system. So those are the ones that we are going to consider. And they include invalid performance criteria. Invalid performance criteria. So first of all, when the criteria or the strategy that is being used to conduct the appraisal system in itself is not appropriate, then you may end up implementing an international performance management system that does not augur well for the targeted recipients. So in the developed world, such as in the United States of America, where performance of employees and organizations are usually measured using metrics such as profits, return on investment, cash flow efficiency, and all these indicators. In other non-Western cultural contexts, much of the emphasis may be salient on trade-based formats, such as the individual's ability to be assertive, to be direct, to take the initiative, their level of friendliness, timeliness, and all that. So when you are trying to assess an individual's performance, you have to pick the right metrics for it, so that if the performance of the person can be quantified in terms of the profits that the person was able to make, or in terms of the returns that the company is able to make, having invested in the person, then you have to let that take a center stage as far as the criteria for assessing the performance of the individual is concerned. Now, the challenge here is that sometimes the metrics or the traits that may be used as the basis of evaluating the assignee's performance may not even be present or embodied by the appraisee in question. So it's more or less like going to ask questions about the volume of sales that the appraisee was able to make, when in actual fact, the performance of the appraisee in question does not measure with respect to volume of sales. So if you use such a yardstick to evaluate the excellence of an individual's performance, then it will eventually turn out to be what? Ineffective. So as much as possible, the criteria that is utilized in measuring the performance of an employee and assessing its suitability should be valid by measuring what it intends to measure. Now, the second challenge to the effectiveness of international performance management system also borders on the rater competencies. And when it comes to evaluating an international assignee or foreign manager's job performance, the key question for us to grapple with is who should conduct the appraisal? Is it someone from the headquarters or someone from the subsidiary country, or someone outside the headquarters and the subsidiary company, but who has a better wealth of knowledge to conduct that appraisal system? Now, The right answer to this question of who should conduct the appraisal will be fueled by the international orientation of the multinational enterprise. And so, irrespective of where the rater is coming from, whether from the headquarters or the subsidiary level, if the individual has not been adequately prepared to administer the performance management tool, then they will be reluctant to administer it. It's more or less like saying, I should go and teach medical school students the physiology of the human anatomy. That is not my specialty and that is not my area. Or if you ask me to go and set questions on the human anatomy for medical students, I will never be able to assess them very well. So the rater competence here means that when you are intending for an international performance management system to be effective, the person that you will put in charge to go and conduct the appraisal should be someone that understands the appraisal tool and how it can be administered. In the same way, the person should also be able to profess solutions to the appraisee after the appraisal comes to an end, so that the information that will be provided as a form of feedback can help the appraisee address some of the challenges that they may be confronted with. Hello, Stella.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Stella. I can see your hand up.
Sir. Yes, please, sir. So please, I want to find out whether these challenges are different from the challenges of the international assignee appraiser.
Okay. So when we talk about the international assignee appraisal, we are only referring to the evaluation of an employee's performance to give feedback whether the person is excelling or not excelling. But when we talk about it as a system, then we are going beyond the appraisal to integrate other components such as training and development. We are also introducing other components such as compensation or motivation to incentivize those that are excelling on the job. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So it's more or less like saying, what is the distinction between performance management and performance appraisal? And we are all aware that performance management is the broader umbrella beneath which we have performance appraisal. Then the third one also has to do with rater biases. So rater biases essentially refer to the errors that are likely to be committed by the supervisors or the managers that will be appraising these international assignees. And these errors ranges from the ones that are committed during the appraisal exercise and the recommendations that they may also profess for them to address their performance gaps. So I'm taking it again. Rating biases border on the errors that are committed by the performance appraisers or supervisors and also the managers. And these errors ranges from some of the mistakes they either deliberately or unintentionally commit during the performance appraisal. It may also be an error that they commit when they are professing solutions for the international assignees to overcome their performance inefficiencies. And there are a number of them. The first one that we are going to consider is what we call the halo effects or horn effects. halo effect or horn effect. In fact, depending on the literature that you will be reading, it can also be characterized as halo biases or horn bias. So halo effect, what does halo effect mean? Halo effect is said to occur when our overall impression of a person influences our perception of their specific traits or behavior. So I'm saying that when our overall impression of a given person influences our perception of their specific traits or behavior. Strictly speaking, halo effect bothers more about our positive impressions that we make about a person, resulting in our positive perception or appreciation of their behavioral traits. So let me give an example. Let's say someone comes for an interview and the person is well looking. So you can say physically attractive. Halo effect will occur if we assume that the person is going to be intelligent because they are well looking. Oh, looking at the appearance of the person, he's in a he is well suited in a coat and tie. The shoe is well polished, tagged in, the hair is well combed, and all that. If we utilize this impression, which is positive, to discern that the person is likely to be an intelligent worker, and for that matter, they will also excel on the job. And we end up hiring them without considering other factors, then halo effect has occurred. Now, so halo effect as a form of bias or as a form of rating bias can lead to overestimating someone's ability or positive qualities based on a single characteristic or initial impressions that we make. So sometimes you may come across someone who is in dreadlocks, and because of the dreadlocks, you may assume that means the person will not be, the person may be a weed smoker, and for that matter, the person will not be a hardworking candidate. And so you decide not to hire that person. If you utilize it negatively, then that is what we call horn effects. So when you utilize it positively, or you use positive impressions to formulate positive perceptions about an individual, then that one is halo effect. But if you derive negative impressions by looking at someone, and those negative impressions drive you to draw negative conclusions about them, then that is what we call horn effect. Now, these are all rating bias because they usually do not form part and parcel of the criteria that are used in rating an employee's performance. So how well the person is looking, how tall or short, how dark the person may be looking, how attractive physically he may be, do not all form part of the metrics that are utilized when we are conducting performance appraisal. But it will surprise you to know that sometimes some of these considerations take a center stage in the rating exercises of some supervisors, and they end up either overestimating or underestimating the potential of employees' performance on the job. So I think I explained the halo effects clearly. So let me touch briefly on the horn effects. So when we say horn effects is occurring, it means that a negative impression of a person has influenced the perceptions that is also deduced as far as their traits or behavior is concerned. Now, the second rating bias, which can also occur as far as international assignee performance management system is concerned, also borders on central tendency bias or central tendency error. And this bias is said to occur whenever the supervisor conducting the rating avoids using high or low ratings and rather assign average ratings. So the challenge here is that some individuals may be demonstrating above average performance, whilst others may be also exhibiting below average performance. But because the supervisor may want to avoid some controversies and confrontation, he just assigning average scores to everyone. So whether you deserve it or not, you are being assigned average. When this sort of rating bias occurs, it is not able to allow us to see the unique potential, the strengths and weaknesses of all the international assignees. They are all lumped together and assigned average rating. So that is the central tendency bias. Then the third rating bias is what we call leniency effect or leniency bias, which occurs when the rater of the international assignee offers undeservedly high ratings. When the international assignee is offered undeservedly high ratings, it means that in reality, the international assignee competencies and performance outcomes does not warrant the higher scores that is being offered by the supervisor. But the supervisor wants to avoid all the controversies and the gray areas that border on clash of cultures, sensitivity to culture, and whether it has to be exploitative or adaptative. If he wants to avoid all those controversies, then he'll just be assigning higher scores, even when you do not warrant it. So when this occurs, it means that all these exceptionally high scores that the international assignee is receiving is not a true reflection of their contribution to organizational success. And that will have serious implications for the multinational enterprise, because on paper, the person will be characterized as exceptionally very good, but that will not be reflecting in the success story of the multinational enterprise. The opposite of leniency effect is what we call strictness effect, which occurs when the international assignee is unduly, the international assignee is being offered performance outcomes that are unduly strict. So being unduly critical of an international assignee's work performance is referred to as strictness effect. And this also occurs when the performance criteria, or if you like, the marking scheme that is being used by the supervisor to appraise the international assignee's performance is too difficult to meet. If the target is too difficult to meet, then strictness effect is occurring. The next challenge to the effectiveness of an international performance management system beyond the rating biases also borders on the host environment. The host environment. And as we learned earlier on that culture is very much important, the international context where the international assignee may also be operating is influenced and affected by a lot of factors inside and outside the confines of the multinational enterprises. And some of these factors ranges from the societal arrangement over the legal arrangements, economic conditions, technological advancements, physical demands, and other factors. Now, it becomes critical to note that even though the metrics that can be used to appraise an international assignee is determined by the standard that has been set by the organization. They must also take into consideration the influence of some of these factors at the time where the international assignee was performing. Now, if the multinational enterprise is wholly owned, then the probability that they can utilize their own prerogative to decide and consider some of these factors as having a role to play in the performance outcome of the employee is easy to determine. But if it is a joint venture, then it means that we are dealing with a multinational enterprise wherein the calling the shots of what must be considered as far as some of these factors is concerned is not only determined by the parent country, but it is also determined by those that are jointly owning the company. So the local partners. And so it becomes quite challenging for them to decide and settle on the factors that should also be considered when they are conducting an international performance management system as far as the host environment is concerned. Now, this is important because as you move from one subsidiary to the other, these factors may be changing. And at some level too, other factors such as COVID-19 may be very much global. And so it can be accepted as a possible factor that can affect an individual's performance in a given calendar year. But in other host countries, the issue about technology or level of education or economic hardship may not be a factor to consider. So host country environment may also determine the composition of some of the factors that are considered when you are appraising an international assignee, and you're also formulating the architecture of an international performance management system. And because these host environments may also be different, it becomes quite challenging to have a standardized way of appraising all international assignees. Then the fifth one also borders on cultural adjustments, which is very much important because every environment, in fact, all international assignees are expected to adjust culturally before they will be able to flourish in the execution of their international assignments. And so every environment will also have its own details that it may require in order for one to adjust culturally well. Now, it is also important to know that every individual has a way of reacting and coping to some of these difficulties that are brought forth by culture when they go on the assignments. So because of these peculiar coping behaviors that individuals may have, the challenge here is that will it be more appropriate to have a standardized way of expecting all of them to adjust within a particular period of time and excel in contributing to organizational success? One school of thought is suggesting that without having a standardized way of expecting employees to adjust, it will be quite difficult to get them to work assiduously. Whilst another school of thought is also of the view that because of individual differences and our reaction to culture is also determined by our familiarity with that particular culture, it will be inappropriate to expect all individuals to react the same way. But the challenge here is that how do we develop an international performance management system that is able to also integrate cultural adjustment as part of the system to discern how swift and how well individuals are able to become accustomed to their operations on the assignment and at the same time assiduously contribute to organizational success. So it borders on issues such as the environment where they are going to work within and the factors that are either pushing or pulling them to excel and the culture that's also maintained over there. Now, the question of who should do the evaluation is something that takes a center stage when it comes to performance management of international assignees. And this is very much treated with the attention it deserves, because if you do not answer the question well, as far as who should do the evaluation is concerned, you are likely to have an individual that does not have the competence to do the evaluation. You are also likely to have an individual that may be competent, but may not be physically available to administer the performance management system. And don't forget, in multinational enterprises, particularly when individuals go on an international assignment, they don't get to go with their immediate supervisors. So they may end up being supervised by a new manager altogether at the subsidiary level. So if we are originating from the convergence approach or the exploitative or the standardized approach to performance management system, then the answer to who should do the evaluation should be someone that is appointed by the headquarters. But unfortunately, this person appointed by the headquarters may not be physically and geographically present at the place where the international assignee is performing. And so the ratings may not offer any good to the ratee as well as the multinational enterprise. Now, research now suggests that an alternative to utilizing just one rater is to rather use multiple raters. Instead of using just one rater, which may be prescribed by the headquarters or may be prescribed by the subsidiary country or whoever is fit to do the job. Research is now suggesting that we should use multiple raters. And the reason why we are supposed to use multiple raters is that the relationship that subsists between an appraiser and appraisee during the performance management system and the suggestions that are also offered for them to improve upon their performance, particularly when it comes out that there are some performance inefficiencies, tend to grant a lot of power and autonomy to the supervisor or the appraiser. And so sometimes they may be raising issues that are not accurate or a true reflection of the performance outcome of the employee. But because the traditional approach grants them a lot of power and autonomy, it is taken as sacrosanct and it gets to be reified. So to get a better appreciation of international assignees' performance, current research and practice suggests that we model after what we call the 360-degree feedback system, or the 360 performance appraiser, a performance management system, wherein at every 90-degree quadrants, an appraiser is made available to provide their candid opinion of how the international assignee is performing. And some of these raters include the peers of the international assignee, his supervisors over there, his subordinates if he has some, the customers or clients that the international assignee will be dealing directly. Now, if you quantify and qualify the wealth of information that all these key stakeholders that surround the international assignee stand to profess to help improve the performance outcome and the international assignee's contribution to the multinational enterprise's success, to that of the traditional approach where the relationship subsists between the international assignee and their immediate supervisor, you realize that the 360-degree feedback system tends to offer an enormous and comprehensive information for which sometimes the supervisor may not even be privy to. Because look at it this way. Sometimes the supervisor may not even share the same office with the multinational enterprise assignee. Sorry, the international assignee. And so when they do not share the same office with them, at what point will they be able to reflect on the true character and behavior of the employee? It is these peers or co-workers of the international assignee that will be privy to their body language and their his or her mannerism in the absence of the supervisor. And so all those insights also go a long way to offer some angle to the appraisal of the performance of the international assignee, especially when it comes to the behaviors that lead to the execution or the performance of a particular task in an office. Sometimes it is not only the volume of sales or the target that has been met by the team or the department, but we also consider how they communicated, how they related with each other. All those sort of relationships also seek to communicate whether the person is a team player and is also inclined to work with others. So when we solicit for performance rating from some of these multiple stakeholders, it means we are drifting away from the traditional approach where there is only a performance meeting between the appraiser and the supervisor and the subordinates. But right now, the relationship is extended to embrace other key stakeholders that also have quality information to share. So the question on who should do the evaluation, although it is contingent on the international orientation of the multinational enterprise, as much as possible, it is suggested that the 360-degree feedback system is utilized so that a comprehensive and enormous performance ratings can be offered for the employee to identify their strengths and weaknesses and also know how best they can improve upon their contribution to organizational success. There was a hand, I saw a hand up. Whose hand was?
Sir, please, it was me, but the question